Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now a while ago I made a short list of games that ran well on low end systems. Since picking up this super cheap eBay machine I wanted to expand on that list a little bit, given that over the past couple of days I've been pushing this old Dell to its limit in different ways. With a Pentium 4 Intel onboard GMA 910 graphics, 1GB of RAM and Windows XP, this PC shares its specs with a lot of aging office and home computers, so here are 10 of my favourite older games that will pretty much run on anything. The first game today is Battlefield 1942, a first-person shooter that can be played online or against AI players as you take part in large-scale battles in various environments. You also have the option to drive vehicles like cars, jeeps or planes, and you can choose to play as part of one of 5 classes: Scout, Assault, Anti-Tank, Medic and Engineer. The maps are also based on real-life battle locations, which is a nice touch, and just look at those minimum requirements. I should add all gameplay has been captured with fraps from my XP Dell machine to give you a better idea of performance. The older operating system meant I couldn't capture the FPS counter, but I could capture the average, minimum and maximum frame rates throughout. Next up it's Morrowind, an absolute classic in the Elder Scrolls series. If you've completed Skyrim endless times on various devices and kitchen appliances, then giving this older release a go is well worth it. Though Oblivion and Skyrim set new standards for the franchise, Morrowind gained critical praise due to its at the time detailed and very open world that also relaxed its emphasis on completing the game's main story. I believe this title also has had an Xbox One X makeover recently, but for a true nostalgic experience, firing it up on the old Pentium furnace is definitely still a great way to play. How could I make such a list though without mentioning Grand Theft Auto? Whether it's GTA 3, Vice City or San Andreas, the pre-HD trilogy for me are still among the best, with Vice City being right up there, though personally I have to say I prefer Rockstar's 90s recreation of the West Coast. Even so, all 3 games will run on even the weakest hardware, including Celeron Ds and Pentium 4s, as well as old AMD Athlons. Vice City's Neon 80s open world may not look at its best on older systems, but don't let that distract you from what is truly a masterpiece. And now we come to Half-Life. I've mentioned before how Half-Life 2 also runs well on low-end hardware, but the first in the series is well worth a play too. As Gordon Freeman, you have to deal with the aftermath of an experiment gone wrong by making your way out of a now ruined research facility. This isn't just an old school run and gun shooter, but an interactive world that still feels very much alive and is still what some may even consider to be one of the best PC games ever. Because of its age, it also runs on even the most potato-y of PCs. Sticking with the FPS genre, and next up it's the original Halo game. This started out as an Xbox launch title back in 2001 and was released for PC a couple of years later. Halo is something I hadn't played up until a couple of days ago when I was trying to find more games for this system, especially considering as a kid I was a PlayStation fan. This is a little more demanding than most other games on this list, but turning everything way down mean it will run with at least 30 frames per second almost all of the time on a Pentium 4, an integrated graphics system. Next up, I've mentioned this one before, but I always have to recommend Mafia when it comes to low-end systems. If you've played Mafia 2 or Mafia 3 and enjoyed them, then I'm certain you'll like this one. And if you haven't, perhaps because of hardware limitations, then this is a great one to go for, as not only is it low-spec PC friendly, but I think it's one of the most fun games I've ever played. You play as Tommy Angelo, a taxi driver who gets mixed up with the mob. The open world still feels great thanks to the realistic damage physics and the emphasis on intricate details like getting pulled over and fined for speeding or arrested for running red lights. Aside from that, this game tells a great story and it's one that can be experienced on most older PCs. Now I just had to include a racing game too somewhere, and Need for Speed Underground struck me as the most obvious. Again, just like Halo, it's a little more intensive on older machines, but I was able to average 28 frames per second with everything turned down. The frame rate will likely be more than double in a solo race or drift course, but I wanted to show you the worst case scenario performance as it were. Next up it's System Shock 2. Would you believe me if I told you this released in 1999? This one takes place in a cyberpunk-inspired future aboard a starship. To me, this game looks and feels way ahead of its time, and it seems a lot of reviewers back then agreed, leading to a spiritual successor, a little game known as BioShock, to release in 2007. This is one of those games that I wondered whether or not to buy it for ages, despite its now low price, and ended up making me regret not doing so 10 years ago. The penultimate title on today's list is Tomb Raider 3. Either 1, 2 or 3 will run great on old PCs, but this is one of my favourites, thanks to the varied in-game locations including India, South Pacific, London, Antarctica and Nevada. Just like other Tomb Raider games, this one gives you a nice combination of combat and adventure, though one thing I will say is that the controls might drive you crazy at first if you haven't played an old Lara Croft game before. Finally, it's Fallout 2. You might think an old point-and-click RPG is a little boring by today's standards, and I'll be honest, I did at first, but it's one of those games that just plays on your mind in between sessions, and you just want to get back into it as soon as you can for some more exploring. This sequel also offers a lot more in terms of content to the original, so if you're stuck between either 1 or 2, this one is better in my opinion, though I hate to say that as someone who likes to make sure I always do things in a relatively sensible order. Having said that though, that brings us to the end of today's list. This has been 10 great games that runs well on basically any system out there. I have done one of these videos, it must be about a year or two ago now, but I wanted to update it with a few more classics that I really do enjoy. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you do have a potatoey PC like this Dell, be sure to check a few of these titles out if you're looking for something new to play, and hopefully they'll run just fine for you as well. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like on it, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.